Ever since the dawn of time, the beginning of literature, and of course the beginning of what I'm going to talk about in this video, comics, the idea of good versus evil has been a staple in the medium, right? Whenever you're telling a story, the idea of a hero, if I'm going to put it in like layman's terms, hero does, gets cat out of tree, and villain puts cat in tree, right? And the idea is that it allows us to kind of see ourselves in the protagonist, right? We relate to the protagonist, and the antagonist is kind of like an allegory of the problems we face in real life. Seeing a hero beat a villain is euphoric in a way, and it's able to explain and get out feelings out of you, right, that you wouldn't really be able to deal with in a complex manner. These stories basically break down complex situations and turn it into a black and white battle of good versus evil. Of course, as stories progressed, this has become much more nuanced and complex, right? Heroes on the further end of like ideology and like morality, right? Characters like a Batman, he has a staunch no-kill rule, and that leads to a lot of discussion, right? His existence leads to ethical debates, which is why I find him such a fascinating character. Going on the other end, characters like Joker and what they do obviously lead to moral debates. But furthermore, there are characters that their entire existence is to challenge these two extremes, those being the anti-hero and the anti-villain. As many of you guys know, the anti-hero has become a very popular term and just genre of character. Anti-heroes are somebody like a Punisher, like a Deadpool, like a Spawn, and their entire thing is that they are morally, they are a hero, right? They won't do anything too dubious, but how they go about methods of protection tends to be very gruesome. Things that you would normally only see a villain doing. The types of aggressive and gory maneuvers they make kind of blur the lines, right? They are very gray. Not that heroes, pure heroes like a Spider-Man, like a Batman, like a Daredevil, like a Captain America can't blur the lines, but on their best and their worst day, you can usually expect them to do the right thing. They might do some crazy stuff, but at the end, they will bring themselves back from the brink. It doesn't really absolve them from the bad things that they do, but you can see that they will make a switch for the better, right? This is how they are as characters. But somebody like a Punisher, they are never going to stop. They are addicted to this, right? The way that they help isn't exactly protecting people through a traditional mean, right? Somebody like a Spider-Man, they go out of their way to protect civilians first and then defeat the bad guys second. Punisher, he would rather deal with a threat head on. And going into anti-villains is a concept that a lot of people are kind of confused about, because anti-hero and anti-villain, those two terms can get very, I guess, muddled. But what I've come to, I guess, understand anti-villains are, as they are characters that do very villainous things, but they have some sort of noble background. The reason why they're doing it is pure, but how they achieve those methods are very questionable, I guess, at best. And in this video, I want to talk about the greatest anti-villains in comics, kind of get our minds flowing on what these characters really are and how you can really perceive and pick them out in media. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Now, as many of us will agree, the greatest anti-villain and the most recognizable is Magneto, Eric Lencher. So, Magneto as a character is, what makes him interesting is that he's so agreeable, it's hard to not understand where he's coming from, because it relates to a very human and just real struggle that happened. He is a character that is deathly afraid of history repeating itself, from time being a circular loop. As a lot of us know, in World War II, since he was of course born Jewish, he was stuck dealing with a genocide, right, of his people, the Holocaust. And moving into his adulthood, when he figured out that he has mutant powers, he was like, I'm going to try my best to prevent this from happening to my people ever again, because he prophesized and he saw this happening. Humans being afraid of what they don't understand, from seeing a greater power than themselves, obviously they're going to retaliate. That, of course, being through Sentinels and all of their anti-mutant projects. And what he wants, his noble goal, he wants to ensure mutant survival, their freedom, their sovereignty, obviously trying to make the nation state of Genosha something that's recognized by the UN. But for these things to happen, he decided that he had to take drastic measures. People don't listen to you unless you decide to hit harder, right? He tried to many times, of course, through adaptations. And I honestly, going like kind of like to sidetrack a little bit, I found it really fascinating to see people's reactions to X-Men 97. Of course, that being the most recent Magneto adaptation on the little screen. And dude, his speeches are so high tier. I honestly think that he might be up there with somebody like a Captain America through how he's able to inspire and really get people onto his side, the audience. And a lot of people like agreed with him, and they're like, dude, the humans gotta go, right? Every time he tries to turn a new leaf, something comes to hit him back down. It's kind of like the Wolverine effect. He tries to live a normal life, but something's always pulling him back into the field to kill again, to fight again. And this happens to Magneto in the show. And it's like, yeah, I really understand what you're saying, but then you see him commit mass murder, and it's like, by like shutting off the poles, you know how many planes and everything like that, cars, the accidents on the highway, all these things that happened. You have to realize that the back and forth, why Xavier's vision makes sense as well. Humans, if you see somebody who is, let's say, a certain group of people that do something, or they're in some sort of predicament that makes them pushed by the higher population as less than, obviously you're going to root for those people. But when those people are literally nuclear weapons who can retaliate and fight against you and destroy entire cities, entire countries at a snap of a finger, you can see why a lot of people have this sort of hatred. It's not exactly unfounded. Obviously, it goes to who started what first. Humans really started it first. So I understand Magneto's point of view and why a lot of us, in a lot of cases, want him to win. But you have to remember, he does have a history of committing terrorist-like acts against innocent people who don't deserve what he's dishing out, right? You have to go after the strong fish, but then again, how do you get those people to listen to you unless you have a show of force? So that's what makes Magneto really interesting. And honestly, you have to remember the good aspects of his character, right? He tries to help people, of course, during like the Utopia era of like Krakoa, and honestly, he's establishing this level of, I guess, mutant peace. What happens is that he is a founder, right? He is a main reason why mutants are able to live in harmony. But whenever there's a threat, he doesn't waver in silencing them. When it comes to stories like God Loves, Man Kills, we saw that that was a situation where he was willing to put aside his differences to work with the heroes to stop a greater threat to mutant kind. So there is some sort of nobility to him, but when humans fight against him, he is trapped in this tug of war of escalation. And that honestly ends up with him fighting against the people that he's meant to protect, right? Ripping out Wolverine's adamantium skeleton, not really caring if he survives. There is some sort of hypocrisy to what he's saying, but then again, it is self-defense at the end of the day. So yeah, setting up the events of House of M with Wanda to make mutants dominant, to eventually have that backfire in his face, to having the no more mutants, like, causal effect. He made a universe with Wanda that mutants were on top, but eventually it came at a cost, right? With Wanda realizing all the things that mutants have done to her life and then completely erasing them. So there is this back and forth of, is what Magneto is preaching actually right for mutant kind? And that is what makes Magneto such an interesting character. Okay, so the next villain I want to talk about is more of a tricky one, because, or the next anti-villain, because he kind of is a villain, right? If you talk about Batman's rogues gallery and you think about how you position people, it does make it more nuanced, and it really does make a compelling argument that Batman has the best rogues. But I am talking about, if you guys couldn't tell, I'm talking about Mr. Freeze. Now, I'm gonna consider Mr. Freeze an anti-villain just from the definition, right? It's somebody with noble goals who just does bad things, right? And Mr. Freeze is literally that definition verbatim. He's somebody who steals, kills, extorts, does all of these evil things, but at the end of the day, it's for his wife, right? To save his wife from the illness that afflicts her. I don't exactly remember what illness that is, and I honestly just for my knowledge and yours, let's search it up right now. Nora Freeze illness. Okay, in Arkham Origins, why is it giving me Arkham Origins? But in Arkham Origins, she had a version of Huntington's disease. It's a neurodegenerative disorder that causes a breakdown of brain cells. So this, I guess, was the idea of Freeze, to keep her in stasis so that she can't degrade even further. And he has to like fund not only this process for Nora to keep her moving, but he also has to keep himself alive. He has to use, I'm pretty sure he has to use diamonds or something of the sort to power his suit, which, bro, Mr. Freeze must be balling or something. Who makes an armor built on diamond? I don't know what the science is behind it. I don't even know if there is any, but at the end of the day, Mr. Freeze has to keep himself alive and Nora, and to do that, you need money, you need resources. The people that he worked for pulled the plug on his research, so he wasn't going to get anything through legal means. And to, I guess, increase her support, her treatment, obviously you need money, right? And as a cryogenic specialist, the best he could do at this point was to freeze her, which honestly is just sad. I really do love in Arkham Knight particularly how he was able to have this very bittersweet ending with her coming out of the ice, but it's like, I don't think there's a villain that makes us feel as much as Mr. Freeze, and his portrayal in the DCAU, completely changing his origin to fixate onto that one plot, is honestly brilliant. But in recent years, it has made Freeze a kind of one-note character, that this is all that he does. And when his wife finally got out of the ice and she didn't really mess with him anymore, it's like, what do you do with this character? And Ram V did a brilliant thing where he made it so that he was a reflection of Batman. He's kind of wandering throughout the world, not really knowing what to do. He's not trying to go after others. He's trying to like seclude himself in this Eden of ice, surrounded with ice sculptures of Nora, which is even more just sad as it is. What I really liked was this, how he painted himself and Batman, this dynamic, if you will, that really elevated Freeze's character, in my opinion. But let's just see what it is. I'm going to pull it up. During the Gotham Nocturne event, one of my favorites. I know it's considered to be very slow by a lot of people, but he did a really cool I'm not so different from you and I speech. So let me read it here. And to kind of give you some type of like background knowledge, Batman is fighting a family called the Organs or something like that, and they were this supernatural family that came to Gotham to kind of make this place right, and they use a lot of magic and cool little folklore type of imagery, iconography, and abilities to fight. And he tells him this, they use something called an asmer, and he's like this. An asmer, he called it. And so I give you this first lesson in the battles to come. The enemy can be frozen. And he's like, why are you helping me, Victor? And he's like this. I used to think you and I were very different ones, when I was trying to save Nora and you kept getting in the way. But now Nora is gone. She doesn't need me. She says she never did. Oh my goodness. And here I stand, toiling each night, building statues to the memory of a woman still frozen somewhere inside of me. I see you now. I understand. The Dark Knight, who battles each night to preserve his innocent vision of this broken city. Gotham is your Nora, isn't she? Storytelling, brother. Oh my goodness, bruh. This man cooked. And I found it to be like really cool how in certain parts of the run, I'm gonna kind of break it down because it might be a little confusing, but Gotham Nocturne by Ram V and all the collaborators like Cy Spurrier and Dan Waters, what it was that it was broken down into 3 different acts, and there was an intermission called an intermezzo, I don't know, but either way, the entire structure was almost like this orchestra, right? Which I really loved how music and the supernatural was such a big part of this run. I almost like made me feel like I was brought back to the Alan Grant days of Batman, but just modernized. And dude, they did such a phenomenal job. Everything that Dan Waters did as well with Arkham City, Order of the World, Sword of Azrael, even the current day Batman Dark Patterns. I'm not going to talk about Nightwing. I've glazed that book enough, and I know you guys are tired of hearing this, but his Batman work also needs to be commended. Ram V with also like Catwoman along with this masterpiece of a Detective Comics run is so good. I know a lot of people as it was coming out found it to be really slow. I can attest to that, but reading it all together is one of my favorite modern day Batman experiences. He just nails the voices of all these characters and says something new with them as well. But either way, I really liked how in the book, Mr. Freeze in these certain points of the story would team up with either Batman or the Bat family, but while he will realize that teaming up with them is for the greater good of everyone, at the end he'll end up backstabbing them, right? Doing what needs to be done for his own interests to carry out his plan. But what I really like is this little piece at the end, at the epilogue of the book, and I'm not really going to spoil it or give you any context because I feel like this book needs to be read with all the character progression that it adds on to a lot of these characters, but I'm just going to read a little excerpt of the end. No context whatsoever, but I felt like how it was portrayed was really beautiful. Let me glaze Mr. Freeze for a second because a lot of people don't really understand what's been going on with this character, and I just want to shed some light on it. So, it goes like this. It's like Gotham lets go of a breath it's been holding. What is exhaled is memory, perhaps, or belief. These are the things that keep a city alive after all. For most, it is a subtle, unnoticed shift, but he is better positioned than most to be aware of it. His own breath, after all, is always visible. It hangs in the air, ice and cold. Gotham's breath runs down the same pathways as the machine with which he intended to freeze the city to death. Of course, there was something going on with the city that was crazy, and he felt like this was the best way to deal with it. And the memory it carries is of something just as cold. And it pictures to this little image of Batman saying, "Look at me." And then Mr. Freeze responds, "You saved her, didn't you? Gotham, you're Nora. We saved her. Then he pauses. Time to move on, I suppose. Freeze does not think again of the machine he poured such care and love into the creation of. He leaves it to rot beneath the city. Perhaps this is cold of him, or perhaps proof of one beginning to thaw. Dude, this is just poetry in motion. I love what he did with Mr. Freeze, and it does signal, if all goes right, that this hopefully it leads to him maybe even teaming up with Batman, relinquishing his criminal ways and stuff like that. That would be a sight to behold. But now let's move on to another group of anti-villains that I like to call, what's the right word? Dictator characters? I don't know, but these are the people who feel like they are the only ones who could steer the ship properly. They'll do all of these heinous acts, but at the end of the day, they feel like they're the only people who can lead humanity or their people to a more prosperous future. And two of the most, I guess, well-known would be Black Adam and Dr. Doom. So let's talk about Black Adam for a minute. So Black Adam, as a lot of us know, is the arch enemy to Shazam. He was the original Captain Marvel, but then he got banished, blah, blah, blah. Now he has the powers of the Egyptian pantheon. And as a character, he was always considered a villain. Eventually, they steered him towards anti-hero in the phenomenal JSA run by Jeff Johns. But we have to realize that he believes in absolute strength, and through that strength is how you keep people safe. He wants absolute sovereignty for his homeland, that of course being Kahndaq, and eventually he becomes somebody who rules his home country. But that comes at a cost. I don't know if you want to consider any of these things justifiable. In Black Reign, I'm pretty sure he overthrows Kahndaq very violently, which, since they were under very, let's just say, interesting leadership, I could see why a lot of people would understand his methods. And he is a good leader of Kahndaq, it's just that he is a limiter, right? Once you believe in dictatorship, of course, a lot of rights will be limited, violated, I don't know what you want to say, but overall he tries his best to keep them safe. His entire goal is to keep the people of Kahndaq in a state of peace and security, but obviously on his own terms. What I do find to be very fascinating was I'm pretty sure it was 52. In 52, one of my favorite comics, I highly recommend everybody watching to read 52. It's basically the comic that will get anybody into DC Comics. It's 52 issues, as the name would suggest, and when it was being published, it was published one issue each week for the entire year. It was supposed to bridge the gap between Infinite Crisis with, of course, Superboy Prime and stuff like that, and the 1 year later status quo, right? 1 year later was basically a jumping on point for a lot of DC's main titles. After Infinite Crisis, they did a huge time gap to signify, here, readers, come on, jump in. And 52 was that missing piece that filled in what happened in the superhero DC universe when we were gone, when we weren't able to see it. And in this moment, he created a family, right? With Isis and Black Adam Jr., I'm pretty sure, and the lot, right? He had his own family, but due to a lot of machinations from a warring country, I don't remember exactly what it is. Let me see. 52, Black Adam. Who did he kill when family died? I'm pretty sure he went against the four. Okay, I'm not getting anything here, but I'm pretty sure he went against the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. It's not the real ones, but of course, machinations, blah, 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 blah. They were sent by this country, right? And they ended up killing the entire Black Adam family. So you know what he would do? He wouldn't do what a normal person would, which is either grieve or fight and delete those people entirely. What he did do, however, was, you know, kill them, but he didn't try to go after the higher ups. He committed genocide on everyone or most people in the country. He destroyed everything, full scorched earth. And I was like losing my mind, bro. And then he was like, all the heroes of Earth, I think, or a lot of them in World War III, this little mini series that kind of displayed the fight that he had with the superhero community. And he ended up like killing like Tara, like punching through her. This man was incensed. I don't know what would have made him more mad, but this was a man at the breaking point. He literally did what he set to do, right? He was like, I'm going to protect Kahndaq and its people by any means necessary, right? And one attack that did a lot of damage, he was like, you know what? I'm gonna live by my rule. And he did it to the absolute extreme end. You know, there's that saying, if you hit me, I hit back harder. He really did that. He destroyed the entire country. And honestly, it's a miracle to see him come back into a heroic light in the recent era. But now let's move on to my GOAT, Dr. Doom. All of these characters are goated, but Dr. Doom is built different, right? And well, Black Adam is too. I feel like dictator villains who have their own nation states are just nice. And of course, Dr. Doom rules Latveria. He is really the embodiment of this, right? He wants to bring order, peace, advancement to the world, but of course, under his rule. He feels like he's the only person who can end all of these inequalities, right? War, poverty, all of this stuff. And the idea of a democratic type of system, he feels is completely null and void. It's for naught, because where has that taken us? Not to the utopia that I want, right? He's very egotistical in how he says his worldviews, but a lot of people end up agreeing with it because of the amount of benefits that he does provide his people. He is a good ruler of Latveria. I'm pretty sure, and I haven't really been reading it, but in the one, is it called One Nation Above? Wait, okay. Dr. Doom event. What's it called? No, not Fortnite, bro. One World Under Doom. Yes, I'm pretty sure he kind of took over the world and he positioned a lot of, not demands, but like quotas, things that he will fulfill. And the Fantastic Four fought against him, and then the people, the general public, did not like the Fantastic Four, right? They were on the side of Doom. He does have a very convincing argument whenever he does say it, like what he's going to provide the people. So that's what really makes him very, I don't want to say an endearing figure, but someone who you could root for, who you could stand beside. He wants to eliminate all suffering, and he has to do that through the expansion of power. In Doom War, he tries to seize all of Wakanda's vibranium to secure more power to then create world peace, to enforce world peace by force. Of course, in like Secret Wars, he was God Emperor Doom. He wanted to fix the world through literally warping reality, reshaping reality, but obviously that involved the deaths of billions of people. So on a surface level, on paper, it sounds like everything that he wants is for the greater good. And dude, I would agree with him for the most part if it didn't involve acts of terrorism. It's like, dude, please just work with the heroes by literally building and conserving their efforts. Like if Dr. Doom was on the side of the good guys, a lot of things in this world would go a lot more smoothly, but alas, we are stuck in an endless battle just because of his hatred of people like Reed Richards, right? He always wants to one-up Reed because he's like, I can do better than you. And he will do literally anything. He will destroy lives if he believes that it's for the greater good and without remorse, right? And he has built up this level of understanding of science, magic, just to build power. And one of the craziest megalomaniac type of things. I don't even know how to explain it. This man was on a crash out. I don't understand. But in Mark Waid's Fantastic Four run, he was in love with a woman, a Romani woman, of course, all of them are Romani, in Latveria, called Valeria, right? And what he did is he literally sacrificed her, his own girlfriend, to demons, burning her skin alive in this sort of ritualistic sense, and forged an armor out of her skin, bonded his armor with her skin to empower himself with hellfire magic, all for the efforts of building more power to save the world. And it's like, what are we doing here, bro? Can you still look yourself in the mirror and call yourself a good guy? If you take off your faceplate, you literally look like Slade Wilson. What are you doing, brother? I don't know, man, but Doctor Doom, everything he does seems very meticulous, but you can sense some level of bubbling rage that he keeps very much in check. He will do anything to steer that arc that humanity's on to a utopia, right? And I really found this quote with Valeria. It was like this: "You taught me the true meaning of sacrifice. For that, I'll always love you." After literally destroying her remains, and it's like, damn, bro. Talk about a villain with purpose, right? Single-minded, mind you, but he always gets what he wants. Okay, hold up, guys. Post-production Nate, I just thought about this, and let me know if you guys agree, but is Amanda Waller an anti-villain? I kind of think that makes sense, especially if you look at recent Amanda Waller in like Absolute Power, where she felt like imprisoning all of the Earth's heroes and villains is for the greater good of society. Yes, she's literally like installing Amazos, working with Failsafe, working with the Brainiac Queen, literally teaming up with villains and even like people in the multiverse just to defeat like the heroes. But the idea is that these people are dangerous. These people have caused so much casualties. At the end of the day, maybe this is the best point going forward. And now I don't agree with that, and literally leaving yourself open to like big alien invasions isn't exactly the smartest move. Granted, she now has Amazos that can literally copy all like the abilities of the superheroes. Maybe that's what she was thinking, but it's like, they are robots at the end of the day. We literally saw the Green Lantern Amazo gain full sentience, right? A full consciousness, and turn on Amanda Waller. Granted, it was for the greater good, and it wasn't like a complete out of control Amazo that went on a killing spree, but it's like, these are things that could happen. But if we go to the actually well written Amanda Waller from the John Ostrander days and the beginnings of the Suicide Squad, she is somebody who is very patriotic. She believes in her country, she believes in keeping the world, and most importantly, America safe, securing their safety, security, and the well-being of her people. And she sees herself as like the last sane people in a world of gods and monsters, to quote James Gunn's start of his universe. But overall, she feels like there needs to be fail-safes to the Justice League, to metahumans overseas, right? The ones that come from Russia, South America, Europe, all of that stuff. China, of course, China having their own Justice League. And I could understand that, but she coerces people, she lies, manipulates. She sees people as chess pieces, pieces on the board to move around. Everybody she interacts with, heroes included at times, not always, but at times, she sees them as expendable assets. Even in the Red Hood and the Outlaws Rebirth run, we saw that she was willing to use Red Hood, Artemis, Bizarro, the entire Dark Trinity to be used on missions, which, fair enough, it wasn't really a high-octane battle that could have caused their deaths, but the fact that she wanted them on the team is enough for you to feel some type of way, especially since these are people at that time that were causing, for the most part, a good beneficial change for the superhuman community. And it's really crazy how she uses villains for her Suicide Squad teams, right? She wants to create criminals into black ops mercenaries that are able to work together under threat in these various, very shady missions, right? If you've seen something like a Modern Warfare, like the missions of like Call of Duty missions, she essentially wants them to do that type of gray, crazy, controversial things, but of course with supervillains and on a higher scale. And you can see how mentally draining that could be, especially for the fact that she uses villains that aren't pure evil. Granted, some of them are, but for the most part, what really messes me up is the fact that a lot of these villains are redeemable, right? They have some sort of heart within them. They can change, they can become better people, but instead they're put on a team with a 90-95% success rate of them dying. If your name is not Deadshot or Harley Quinn, you are not making it out alive, unless we speak about Tom Taylor's Suicide Squad run, and spoilers ahead, Deadshot kinda dies. But either way, if your name is Harley Quinn, if your name is Harley Quinn, you're fine. She does do some things that even somebody like Deathstroke would see as cruel, so you win some, you lose, Amanda. But yeah, she's made a lot of enemies, both good guys and bad. I guess that's what happens when you have like the heart of a warrior, right? Everything that she does, there are backup plans upon backup plans, and every single one of them on descending order is worse than the last. But what can you do? And finally, I want to talk about Thanos. This is a very controversial pick, I know, but let me cook. Infinity Gauntlet Thanos and Infinity War Thanos were very quote-unquote noble. Now, I know comic Thanos, for the most part, his entire ideology is to obsess with death. He loves Mistress Death. He's not a simp, he really is. And the entire purpose of him snapping his fingers, what he said was to balance the universe, right? To tip the scales, to not deal with all of the, I guess, overpopulation issues that occurs in the universe. If we think our planet is overpopulated, think about the Marvel universe and all the crazy galaxies that they have to deal with. But at the end of the day, he's not exactly a cosmic philosopher. He likes to paint himself as such, especially in Infinity War with his entire balancing the scales thing. I would consider him that. But in the comics, he uses this as a front. He really just wants Mistress Death. And and this really brings me to that hater moment in, like, was it a Thanos run? But there was this one moment that I remember that subscribers actually reminded me of as well in the hater video that I'm surprised I forgot and I didn't put in the video. But there was this one moment where he literally tormented this one guy for his entire life. Maybe one day or some sort of timeline that he set for this guy, he would just torment him on end. And he would never kill him, he would just do the most egregious things in his life and then just taunt him. But that's what keeps him from being an anti-hero, because what type of hero would just pick one person out of the trillions, quadrillions, sextillions of people in the galaxy just to make their life a living hell? Thanos, in the films at least, while I might see him more as an anti-villain, you have to think about it. Was this something he really wanted to do? Maybe he just wanted to commit mass murder and genocide. Endgame Thanos is kind of different from Infinity War Thanos and a lot more bloodthirsty. And if you think about it, he didn't really need to snap his fingers and get rid of half of the universe. He could have, you're basically a god with the Infinity Gauntlet, with the Infinity Stones. Of course, in the original run in Infinity Gauntlet, it was called gems, but with those gems slash stones, I'm talking too much about the semantics of it all. But either way, you have the ability to look on high. You are like a watcher. You have the ability to make more resources, and yes, this might lead to more people being born, but the power of the gauntlet means that you can keep making resources. You could use your power to spread people out across the cosmos. In IRL, there is so many places in the galaxy that are left unexplored. Of course, in Marvel, it's more explored, but it's also more vast. I'm sure you could find places for these people to be. I'm sure you could reality warp and create more places. Like, I don't know where this argument is coming from when Thanos goes on to his whole, I don't know, like, man thinks he's Plato or something, but either way, he wants to help. He wants to make sure that people don't end up eating each other over a survival of the fittest mentality because we don't have much left. But Thanos, you can provide more. But either way, guys, what do you think? Have I left out any specific anti-villains that you thought I should talk about? Do you guys have more of a better understanding of what anti-villains are? And are there any sort of anti-villains in fiction that you guys really agree with or just find to be very fascinating? Of course, if you look at like things like One Punch Man, there's Garo, there's Invincible, where there's that one character that I don't really want to spoil who becomes an anti-villain at the end. If you know, you know, but I don't want to spoil people, you know, because I'm just like that, of course. I'm a gentleman, of course. Would you consider somebody like a Harley Quinn to be an anti-villain? I don't know, but what do you guys think? Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, turn on post notifications so you know when a new video goes live. And yeah, see you all later. Deuces. Take care.